Hi there, and welcome to the Data Talks podcast. I'm Mara, part of the curatorial team at the Architekturmuseum of the Technical University of Munich, and the team behind this series. At Data Talks, we explore the often hidden architectures of data infrastructures and ask why they matter to us as professionals, educators, and citizens. In our first 4 episodes, we look at how the digital shapes our spaces. From energy-hungry server halls to classrooms, and from busy streets to the networks of our minds. These episodes were recorded in winter 2023 during a seminar at TU Munich. If this sparks your interest, come see us in person in Munich too. Starting October 15th, this research and much more will be on display at the exhibition City in the Cloud, Data on the Ground at the Pinakothek der Moderne. And Data Talks will be subsequently updated with new episodes from the upcoming public program. So, keep in touch and have fun listening.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Infrastructure of Data. The matter of data is often invisible in our daily life. Through research and interviews with experts, we explore the influence of data on us and our planet and try to make it more tangible. This podcast series is part of an exhibition curated by research associate Damian Kokalewski and students from the Technical University of Munich. Today's episode deals with the topic of the so-called smart city. It is about collecting and implementing data such as traffic, investment, and crime activities with new and smart technologies to make cities lucrative, efficient, and safe. Often led by private companies as Google, smart data technologies can lead to segregation and manipulation of citizens. We want to discuss the actual goal of big data for cities and what kind of data we have to collect and implement to help communities in our cities to have a better but not necessarily more efficient way of living together. Also, the role of the architect could change, since data flows have a different speed of acting than architecture and urban design processes. So, as an alternative to the smart city technologies of today, what can be proposed? I would start with introducing you. You're Nick Förster. You're working at the chair for architectural informatics at the Technical University of Munich. And probably I just let you talk a little bit about your background, about like your positions, your past positions, your interests, and also maybe your field of research you're acting in right now.
Yeah, I can do that. I started quite classically in architecture, like being interested in buildings and cities and so on. And then my education got a little bit mixed up. I did some stuff with performative urbanism, like performative projects in urban spaces. And then at the same time later, like more in the direction of architectural informatics and and like also parametric design. So like I was always interested in this hands-on approaches with digital technologies and so on. And this was like also during my studies and also my work right now, like always accompanied with like urban studies and architecture theory perspectives, I suppose. And the idea, or my motivation would always be like to bring these together, like to use like critical making approaches, for example, to interact directly with technologies and with data, and like understand like the friction and like the small problems and so on, by interacting with that and then reflecting on that simultaneously with theory and like critical discussions of what is happening there. And maybe like also to introduce and what we will talk about today is I'm working on a PhD project currently at the chair of architectural informatics on the one hand, and on the other hand at the Institute of European Ethnology with Ignacio Farias. And so my PhD is happens also in between like architectural informatics, and then on the other hand like more science technology studies and urban studies inspired approaches to shed light on these digital urban projects.
So you're doing like both of the chairs are involved in your PhD right now?
Yeah, I mean, you have a first and a second supervisor, and Frank here, Patsoi is my first supervisor, and Ignacio Ferrier is my second one. But yeah, of course, like the topics are both there.
Interesting. So it's also probably mainly about this holistic analysis about like the theoretic background and like at the SDS, no, sorry, at the chair of Professor Farias, and then you have like the more architectural, or how does it come together?
Yeah,
right now.
So this I'm still figuring out somehow. But like, yeah, like on the one hand, like of course I'm interested in like the critical discourses on smart cities, like thinking of what are the politics of these projects, how can we understand them not as only technical projects, and what is like also the cultural context around them, and how are they remaking planning in many different ways, like also maybe non-digital ways. And then on the other hand, at the chair of architectural informatics, we do of course a lot with making tools, interacting with technologies, thinking about like how are these things, like for example, how are sensors used to understand certain urban issues, or how are technologies used to transform planning in a way, or like to facilitate participation in different ways. And like I think the one way would be like speculating how this is happening, like thinking of different ways how we can use these technologies and experiment with them like in a rather open way. And the other way would be like to like study the context critically.
Yeah, nice. No, it's also like preventing somehow for like preventing from this like kind of global narrative of the smart city itself, which is, as you already told me once, quite outdated word as such. And this cosmopolitics of like the humans and the non-humans in this context, which is often, I think, also not really understood. So like probably people are thinking like, let's say if there's a smart city, like it's all about the technology. If you have smart lights, it's already a smart technology, but like the background is all different, or the background, like politics or the actors. Like we already know like which actors, for example, if we take Munich as an example, which actors do we have, like, or how like smart city approaches work within this, like say, Munich politic scene.
Maybe we can come back to just because we talked about that paper before, like the paper by Wittmer and Ferriers, which is titled like Ordinary Smart City. And I like that paper because like it also leads us to this point that smart cities are actually maybe not something new anymore. And they like everyone already notice it when you study like what is being talked about when you talk about smart cities, that it's actually quite ordinary things, and that the narrative is also a little bit outdated. Like it seems to belong to the early 2010s with all these like surveillance discourses, which are still relevant, of course, somehow. But at the end, when you look now at municipalities, the problems are way more, ordinary, like banal, maybe even. And like, for example, when you ask, I think I remember Elisabeth Merck, who was the Stadtbaumeisterin, like city learning planning director, perhaps. And I think she mentioned once that, like, in her perspective, like, of course, Munich was already always a smart city because, like, I mean, of course, like, of course, like, modern town planning always has relied on some metrics, on collecting data, on monitoring infrastructure in one or the other way. So I think this is actually what's interesting, that now when looking at this a little bit outdated smart city narrative, that we have to look at, like, how is it somehow also historical? How is it like rearranging practices of planning? How is it situated like in this, I mean, they usually look boring, like this very everyday planning cultures also in like planning departments and municipalities and so on.
Mm-hmm. So is it also about somehow these processes? So it's like, I mean, in the end, you have like a new role. Like, do you have even new roles, or is it just reinvented roles of, for example, like the city planners, or or also the city council Frauenberg, or like is it also mainly about, let's say, experts, or like one role does like the ordinary citizen play in this whole field somehow?
Yeah, maybe like maybe we can shift to the example of the digital twin, which is of course named as one of the key projects in the smart city strategy in Munich, for example. And I think what is interesting with that project, I mean, I'm skipping now the big narrative of the digital twin, but when you look at what concretely happens in these digital twin projects, it's also a lot about like just restructuring governance, I would say. Like you like create new ways of working together. You implement new methods, like sometimes they're called agile, sometimes they are called differently, new forms of participation. So I think maybe it's also interesting to look at how like planning is transformed also in non-digital ways through these smart city projects or through the digital twin, which may also include like non-digital things and like I don't know, using like forcing new, not forcing, but maybe fostering new collaborations also between different cities in the world, fostering new, like in the smart city discourse, of course, it's also about like always like global players who define standards, for example, or like enterprises who define like technical standards maybe, and like municipalities, and so also bringing like global and local discourses together, perhaps.
No, but the question is like, and for example, for the audience who doesn't know about like technology in cities or the digital twin, would you say that it can be named very concretely that a digital twin is this and this, or is it more than like, I always thought of a digital twin, of course, you have a 3D scan and you have like this 3D model of a city, and you have like sensors who are giving like data to you and showing the cars who are floating through the city. But is it like a rather like somehow it has to go beyond it? So somehow it has to have also a more abstract view of the things. I mean, also we as data producers can somehow be like digital twin of ourselves, and we're just there to collect data to give to the government or to give to a certain app, and in the end we're like it's like there are many ways, and I'm just wondering what you're thinking about like this concept or the concrete digital twin.
I'm still wondering about this. I mean, let's call it maybe a metaphor for now, the digital twin, because I think what is really interesting is that, like, when you read about digital twins or when you talk about what it is, like everybody, like in urban digital twins, other digital twins, they always talk about like copies of NASA rockets, for example, or like always these projects in manufacturing where you have like a digital twin of a very complex product, and then somehow when you go to cities, like it's kind of evident that like it won't work like that somehow, right? And so the first thing what people usually say when you ask them what a digital twin is, it's not like one digital twin, or it's not a digital twin, or it's not a digital twin. And I think that's kind of interesting. And then it becomes a lot of different things. Sometimes people tell you that it's rather a shadow because it only like goes in one direction. Sometimes people tell you that it's like a multiplicity of things. I think that's also interesting, that it's not one mirror image, but like actually a lot of different things. And I think this is maybe something which should be explored further, like which I'm also interested in, is like how multiplicity of actions, like because people are of course working in these digital twin projects and they are doing a lot of very concrete things, like I'm getting later to that maybe, and like how this multiplicity somehow maybe in the end may lead to like something which is somehow like a very complicated mirror image. I'm thinking of, I don't know if you're familiar with that example, but like from Herman and Latour, there's this project which is called Invisible Cities, like Paris Invisible Cities, and it's about like all the monitoring infrastructures and networks which somehow represent the city and are somehow like powerful perspectives of planning, like the money source, for example, through which you understand how well your sewage is doing right now, or like traffic monitoring. And I think that could be actually a very interesting thing to think of a digital twin, like as this multiplicity, and think of like how are different ways of planning and understanding the city like remade, how are they coming together in something like a digital twin, how are they rearranged, how are collaborations between these different things happening, and so on. And yes,
So it's also like I wrote it, or I read it on the website of the STS. There's also one, like, I don't know the name of the person who is actually doing it, but it's like a one course, and there she says that exactly that, I don't know, I just wrote it here, exactly the digital, or the digital twin, or this topic of digital worlds. It's like it's important to see it as a performative part of our reality, and not just of a representation. And I think this is like somehow exactly the thing you said right now, because it's like way more complex than just 3D scanning a facade and then having the street there, but like everything comes together. And it reminds me, I don't know if you're familiar with Shannon Matter, and because she also talks about these dashboardings and our dashboards and dashboarding, and how it is somehow also simplifying the whole city in a way, like to make it more diagrammatic. And I don't know, for example, Barcelona can be a good example for this. Or do you know any like examples where it works good, like this kind of dashboarding, but where there's not the city who governs with the dashboards, but where it's like somehow like a collaboration or a participational way that the people, the citizens, and the government works together, like without this carrot dashboard.
you mean like not such a techno solutionist way, maybe? Yeah, and I also really love like how Shannon Matten writes, like also with these historical perspectives on the dashboards and so on. And I think maybe it's like what I'm interested in these digital twin projects is, of course, sometimes like this, for example, like the dashboards would be like an extreme reduction, right, of an topic. Like I think Matten uses this example of the car dashboard, which makes like a very complicated machine driving in a very complicated way, like understandable for someone who has like only like a little bit of attention. And so this is the logic of the dashboard, like one of very strong reduction. And I think that's interesting, of course, and it has like a certain politics, because you describe your goals, and you you inscribe politics of reducing very complex things to something which is like a simple how well are you doing monitor. And I think what is interesting in these digital twin projects, that those situations are there, of course, and also like the mirrors, of course, like we could understand this like this panoptical perspective of power, right? And then on the other hand, you have very complicated moments which are not so unambiguous, and where it's really about, I don't know, these practices of discussing with city officials how they are planning, for example, or discussing how participation should work, and so on. And there it's a lot messier, I think. Maybe I think it could be a good approach to think critically about the smart city project, is like to understand like when these reduced and oligoticons, maybe, and to use Latour's word, like how are they constructed, and like what are the very messy and ambiguous processes of making these very unambiguous things. And so I think it's both. Like you have very messy and moments, and you have very these clear moments which somehow emerge, and which of course like are like a powerful perspective for planners and so on. And I guess both are political also.
So where it's also important to, like, in the end, also to visualize and to represent in a way, like in a simple way, the complex things, which are actually another kind of problem, because I think that I wrote an article in the Architekturmuseum from James Bridle, and they said that somehow like we don't need to be experts in a way. We don't need to be like programmers or informatics to see it critical, but we somehow have to understand technology. We have to understand like what's behind this icon or what's behind it. He says it like in order or like for apps and stuff of open source software, and somehow that this open source tools should have also a kind of an educational function for citizens to reflect and to criticize this in a way. So could this also be kind of the role of the architect to do this with representation and with like
I think it is even already part of these projects of digitization, because I mean, this is also, I think, maybe it's even in this ordinary smart city article, that like when we start with this very critical attitude and see like panopticons everywhere, then we are very surprised when we go to, like, for example, local municipality, because I don't know, these officials are often very critical of digital tools themselves and so on. And I mean, of course, like this digital twin projects happening right now, they are very conscious about being participatory and so on, and thinking of different ways. And I think what is then maybe interesting is like looking in a more nuanced way at like how is planning remade, what ideas of participation are happening there, and so on. And also look not only at the digital tools, but also in what cultures they exist and how they are working. And I think that's actually an interesting point also for architectural perspectives on these smart technologies, because like planning is of course very complicated, and like it is not so it doesn't follow like digital technology like that directly. Like I know, like I think Mattern writes about that the dashboard is of course like an ontology, like an urban ontology maybe, which somehow tells you what the city is, and also has very strong normative implications for planning. But in the end, when you look at how planners use programs, also like there's a lot of that in planning studies, for example, that it's very very ambiguous, and that the screen might be one element in planning, but the discussion happening next to the screen and like all the context is also very important. So I think that could be an interesting architectural examination of smart cities to look at like the broader planning context and the broader, like what's happening around these projects also, which also would help us maybe to understand it, smart city projects more locally. Because I mean, of course, like a smart city project happening in India, even if it uses the same technologies, would be completely different than the smart city project happening, for example, in England.
Right. But so is there like somewhat, I mean, so the classical, let's say the classical feel of the architect somehow, I mean, also do other this only also a little excerpt, because we did like this seminar at Van Elsa, where we also had to kind of find new roles of the architect in order to challenge the Bauwende also in a way. And so probably they're like also regarding this like digital technologies in city and city planning, and this process is like to have a different planning a culture, and I don't know, more diversity in the fields and in the people themselves. So that's also like kind of reform, and the role will be a new one in the future for architects, probably. And is it like is it like that digital technology can help to enhance this, or do you still think that so it's too banal or too techno-fix to think about this?
Maybe it depends on the way in which you think about it, but I always found like from, I think it's in Extra Statecraft by Keller Easterling, she writes about also a little bit how architects can work with, I think in her case it's more like infrastructure in general and standards and so on, but it also applies to digital infrastructure, I think. And then I think she calls it maybe I'm mistaken, but like an active form, I think. And the idea is that somehow that these active forms have a certain disposition, like that they like make actions happen, that they shape actions somehow, and so that I thought this is interesting because it brings together like how you design technology to how you think technology, and then also how you think like in a more procedural way maybe, and the more like these participatory things, and how you plan like thinking in a performative way, and then about not thinking only in a very technological way about infrastructure and so on. That's true. So I think it maybe helps to think like a little bit when you're an urban designer. Of course, you think very strategically, and more strategically maybe than differently strategically than the architect, maybe the general architect doing buildings. And so I think maybe working with technology helps you to think also strategically, because you somehow prefigure actions like in a non-deterministic way, of course, but you think like how are these tools used, then you maybe check how the tools actually operate, and like how they are maybe used differently than you thought before. And yeah.
Is it also that like and at your for the collective you are working with, like Point of No Return, are you also kind of working with digital tools, or or is it like more like say separated from your research topic? Because I think you're working with like kind of performances, you work with like in participation, it should be like more engaging with the people, with citizens, and yeah, probably this is this first part which has to be rethought without thinking about the digital technology. Because I think it's also important always to like to have this grounded perspective, or to have this.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I mean, concretely, like in this collective, I'm the only person. Maybe not anymore. But like, I'm at least the people who are like interested as digital technologies as a main subject, not a tool to use for other things. Like it's the minority of people having that as a research topic. But I think on the other hand, like what would be very important for me would be to think like these performative perspectives together with digital tools, because like a lot of interesting things like when you could be brought into like experiments with technology, like using, for example, technology in urban spaces, I think makes a huge difference. If you to take like a sensor and then making data yourself and playing with it, and also including like what is the corporeal experience of walking around in these spaces and gathering data, and how is like a specific topic performed by that. I think that's very helpful, and I think it somehow draws from the vestiges of, I don't know, like performative urbanism maybe.
So you think also about this like in a very concrete sense, this example of CMOS architect sensor and
and Nerea Cabello.
I think it's like the
that's an amazing example. That's really cool, I think. Maybe for documentation, that because they are doing these these projects between commoning and like sensing, I would say, like a lot with the digital visualizations of like shared problems like air pollution and so on. And I think that's very inspiring, because it is actually exactly about that in that case, digital visualization is not only showing like an evidence, but like I think Cavillo calls it an attunement, like something like a more complex way to be with a problem, I guess. Like thinking, does it only affect you as an individual? Is it a topic for planning? How do you visualize it? Like, is it how do you see it as a part of the city? And I think, that's a very productive way.
Yeah, definitely. So it's also about this. I know in one lecture, Matrin talks also about like how she would kind of architecturally solve it, or not solve it, or tackle it. And she also talks about this parasite, like to think about parasites in the city, which doesn't have to be, which can be twins or something, but which doesn't have to be a very productive or very efficient, but also in like kind of an attunement or kind of follies were just around, and like making you think also about data and just like interacting with them and creating data.
Yeah. Maybe that's also because we had that before. Also, like interesting when we talk about twins and when we think about how we can make twins productive. And I mean, there's by Hillel Schwartz this book about the culture of the copy, for example. And there are a lot of different types of twins. Like for example, the vanishing twin, which is succumbed to the surviving twin. And it could be interesting to think of the digital twin like that in many different ways. Like what is it absorbing? What does it maybe help? How does it lie sometimes and sometimes not, and so on. So maybe that could be a nice starting point for like a more open exploratory design practice around digital twins.
Definitely. A lot of emergent practices, as said, are like working. It's just, I don't know if it's an approach with like this 3D scanning of objects and stuff. I don't know if it's like kind of, if it's this kind of fetish or if it's can also be is kind of productive in a way, or if it is productive or if it's just a trendy thing to do right now. Because you see more often in like different design practices also.
Yeah, like maybe I can supply an example. Like we had this first issue, like in this recurring workshop, which is somehow tied to my dissertation, which is called critical modeling. We had it a couple of times at the Chair of Architectural Informatics, and the first one was really about that, like making data and then also experimenting with 3D scanning. Like for example, I was once interested in what is the material practice and performance of making these scans, and then I tried to scan the Sonnenstraße, which was one of the areas where we also got data from the digital twin team. Like I tried to make a second scan of from the pedestrian perspective with my mobile phone, which somehow worked actually surprisingly well. And like it was still kind of uncanny, but like how it looked in the end, but it was quite interesting. And then the project we continued with that, and like for example one group, Hannah and Sharon, they thought about like how then different models, not the scanned ones, but like semantic models, how they're addressing the topic, for example, of safety for different groups. And I mean, of course, like security is like a topic very closely associated with smart cities and so on. And which also is like, of course, by you have semantic data about like polars. Is it polars in English? Like polar.
Polar.
Like barriers for like anti-terrorism barriers, for example, or you sometimes have information about lighting and so on. You could continue with that, of course, like with surveillance, which is in Munich, like from a municipal perspective, not so relevant, but still. And what they were wondering then is how we can somehow find more collaborative and maybe like a bottom-up perspective on the semantic models. And what they did was then like to counteract like this perspective of the semantic models, first with surveys and more maybe ethnographic explorations of the Sonnenstraße, and then in the end, I think they made like a digital tool, like a where you could walk around the Sonnenstraße like digitally, and you had to also, you could move through this 3D model and look at different types of semantic data, which would somehow affect security. And then they would superimpose that data, like existing data perspective by like more personal mappings of asking different people who are out there in the Sonnenstraße, different very heterogeneous groups, like what their feeling of safety is how this is affected, and like adding tags basically to the geometry. So like finding a critical approach to semantic modeling. I thought that was a very nice idea, and I think it's like playing around with this. Also with the 3D scans, maybe. I mean, there are a lot of projects about these 3D scans right now, which are also very interesting. But I think about the 3D scanning, it's like what is interesting about that is because that would be for a lot of people like this mirror image, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so maybe about that, it's interesting, like to look at how this image is made, like in a very effortful way, and then also, like that it's not like a historical mirror image, but that you can also go back and in history and think about like how is this planning perspective on like having this scan. I think maybe it's interesting to think about like how like planning perspectives are constructed like through standards and so on, and like maybe. I mean, this is, I guess, something we can learn from science technology studies and so on, that it's not like what is an objective fact like is not defined a priori. Like you could say, okay, the atmosphere is maybe something we cannot quantify right now. Other things could be also like it. I think it's more about like what do we make quantifiable, because it's like also powerful perspective for planning, like for good or for bad. But I think this may be an interesting question, like also because these digital twins are now always about like connecting like more qualitative participatory approaches and what you would call maybe hard facts. I don't know, like the already datafied perspective somehow. And maybe it's interesting to think about like what is being quantified, how much, and what influences it. It's more like a qualitative position maybe, and like how it gets together, how this is being remade in these digital twin projects. I think maybe about the digital twin projects, because like maybe one thing, because I wondered a lot what they are actually about, because like somehow like nothing seems to be specifically new about them. Like 3D models existed before, like cybernetic ideas about like the city as this data landscape, somehow it was there before. Simulations and this question of what if, like it's also like nothing specifically new. And I think maybe what is actually something which is happening right now, not that it would be new, but I think which is actually really something which is happening maybe in different ways now, is like how planning and municipalities are reassembled also, and then like new connections are made, like but in very heterogeneous ways, like by fostering new collaborations, for example. But I mean, all that existed before, but I think this is like a common denominator between digital twins. Then of course standards, then catalogs maybe, which capture data somehow and like make the city understandable in different ways. Yeah.
What books you're reading right now from there? What books or what series you're watching?
Maybe a movie which I found very interesting regarding the topic of digital twins. Is it one which was partly produced in Munich and which somehow precedes this topic of digital twins, and it's called Welt am Draht, and it's a movie by Fassbinder, somehow like a science fiction television movie adaptation of Simulacron 3, I think, and it's about like it's a 2-part movie, and the first part is about like a simulation expert who has like a very intricate simulation. Sometimes you see the simulation, it actually looks like the city basically, and just a little bit less people because the computational power is too high still. But still you somehow realize that something is wrong in this world, because like everybody interacts in a very weird way, and like acoustics don't seem to fit really, and so on. And like everything is very stereotypical also in a way, like gender stereotypes, for example. And then the first part is very much about like the simulation expert discussing with like a very powerful person from the industry if the simulation model should favor like steel industry, I think it was. So it's really about the politics of representation somehow, and it's about like very basically like a critical mapping perspective, like how are political interests depicted by the simulation model. And then you already guess it in the first part, like of course in the end you realize everything is a simulation. And he is somehow also trapped in that simulation. I like that moment that then suddenly like the simulation is not only the object of politics, but it becomes the word. Like it's a very cosmic political way to think of it, I think. And then he has to escape, and I think there's also a romance and everything. And yeah, I like that very much.
It's the pre-version of the Matrix.
Yeah, it's very much like a Matrix thing, but I like that it's this form of 2 movies, and then also it also somehow fits to this digital twin thing, and also it's the first local digital twin in Munich from like early 70s, I suppose.
Really nice. So a good recommendation.
It's a Jersey worth watching.
I have to see it. Yeah. Nice. That sounds fun. Probably another thing which I probably cut in before is which we didn't talk about. Probably is also a little bit over the top. Is this whole AI topic, which twins and this true. I don't know if you can. I don't know. Briefly say if it is important also for your research right now, or if it's yeah.
My main engagement with AIs is complaining in courses that making images with an AI is like not to be mistaken. It is a cool idea, but I mean, I think maybe I would leave it like that for now.
Yeah, perfect. So we exclude that thing.
Yeah, it's okay. That's nice.
Perfect. Yeah, Phil. Thank you very much, Nick, for the nice talk.
Yeah.
And
Looking really forward to seeing how this project unfolds also, and listening to the other podcast episodes, I guess.
survey. Yeah, actually, I wanted to know if you know the example, and probably ask what was your first impression of it, because I thought most of the people were quite shocked about the fact that it's actually already going to be built.
But is it in
It's new construction.
thought it's
The foundations are already going to be.
it's this high speed
It's-
linear city connected by this train basically, and you have those powerful hands and you just have a linear city. Yeah.
And it's like a giant shard of glass or mirror, kind of stretching for over a kilometer, I think, in length, and like literally just buried into the desert floor.
I mean, there's so many aspects. If we're just thinking about the history of city development, starting, I don't know, with the first cities, and also the cities we as human find approachable and we like and are good for our eyes, with the symmetries, with the proportions. I mean, that's all scientifically proven now. Like, we like how people feel safer and more comfortable in those narrow streets and old towns. We'd like to have a variation of spaces, narrow and wide. So I think if you're just developing a smart city from scratch, you're missing out on all those maybe primer instincts of the citizens, of the human per se. That would be like the first concern, besides from the ecological, economical, financial stuff that is definitely there when you're building a glass concrete linear city in the desert.
So I think this city, and like the smartness is one aspect of it. The other is probably the symbolism of inhabiting the desert, or this vast and empty territory where you don't have any societal issues, right? You can do whatever you want because there's no constraint, because there's no existing tissue to work with. There's no existing city, so you literally take it for granted. It's tabula rasa, needing to be colonized, and this is the first problem with it.
In 1969, there was already work by the Super Studio thing. It was a project called like Il Monumento Continuo, and it was basically like exactly the same. The imagination is exactly the same. You have like a long linear building, and then you have like glass on your surface, and then it's kind of reflected on the glass, the outside world. So the aesthetical reference is already there, old as time. Like the basis of the narrative, actually, they have actually this climate change narrative that we have to take into consideration, because the crown prince of Saudi Arabia now is the most ambitious prince I've ever known in my life. He really wants to make the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, as the new center of the world, because I mean they're super rich. They have a lot of revenues in oil. They have revenues also from this pilgrimage, which is insane amount, hundreds of billion per years. And he also kind of is smart, so he reads a lot of future projections what is going to happen with global trends such as climate change, automatization, all of this smart city thing. And he actually tries to respond to that because he wants to make Saudi Arabia ready for the future. And so this is like the main attitude which we need to understand. And therefore he wants to, he reads this climate report and projects like by 2050, Saudi Arabia is not anymore habitable because the temperature rises, we're going to rise. And then the temperature there in the desert in Saudi Arabia is just going to rise extremely. It's going to be drier and stuff. And then that's why they want to make a inside city in which everything is regulated temperature-wise, especially, so that it's actually habitable. So I think that's the basic which you need to understand. That we can now discuss about that.
Shouldn't we, I think also the approach is discussable. Like, should you prepare for this scenario or should you try to fix the scenario?
Yes, citizen question, adapt or try to fix it, yeah.
Because obviously other cities where the climate change or which aren't affected by the climate change could develop in this direction. So it could be also part of the concept of cities who aren't that affected from the climate change, for example. But yeah, I mean, maybe the main point I wanted to point at that example was that it's like it has like this absolute form, this simplicity, and everything can be behind these walls out of glass.
But I mean, is it simple? Because imagine if that one train, which doesn't have a driver, of course, is not working. How are you, because the distances are so long that they are not walkable, because you have this high-speed train, which almost like teletransports you from one point to another, I think 1 kilometer and I don't know how many seconds. So if you're losing energy or something, what are you doing?
I mean, it's a whole city based on a high-tech operational, requirement. It's not like something which can function.
Yeah,
low-tech.
I think the key issue here is that I don't think it's a city at all. First of all, the line is not a city, right? It's a project that kind of projects something, right? And that creates a exclusive vision of a society. You had the exactly same vision by Elon Musk for building a city on Mars. So you could kind of compare the Crown Saudi Prince with Elon Musk, right?
They have money, they have vision.
Exactly. This is a very old idea of this utopian societies that somehow should fix all the problems, right? It's just like not on Mars, but it's on the most hostile environment that is changing rapidly in a desert, right? So we just don't have, I think, at this point, information whether this is built for climatic reasons. I'm not sure that's the narrative there. I think the narrative there is rather building an society for the future with exclusatory rights to call themselves that and to kind of have people who are inside or outside. And if you're outside, probably it's very scary, right?
I mean, I guess it's a political thing, of course. Also, if we're thinking about Toronto, I mean, it got cancelled or failed because of data restriction now, because of no clear state laws on how to guarantee data privacy or these issues. And I mean, in another political system, that's just not an issue because people don't have the right to decide what is going to happen with the data. So I think that's also the main point of the smart cities, how we can like reach a smart city without forgetting.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question to raise. How would a smart city for everyone look like, right? So how would it really enhance the civic liberties, democracy, education, accessibility, privacy? So all these things can be heavily influenced by the smartness mandate of cities. And I don't think it's all bad. I just think that it somehow needs more thinking in the direction of collaborating with the city officials and designers and architects. Like it needs somehow a mechanism that is two-sided, not just one-sided, right?
I mean, there's this wheel of interdependencies, I think, that is trying to connect all those sectors that makes a city really. And because I think that's one thing, if they're creating a smart city, they're probably just having a few aspects in mind, like smart being technically smart being, I don't know, safe or secure, but they're kind of forgetting all those infrastructures, all those human-centered social issues like privacy, like anonymity in the city, like community participation. I think those are all very important aspects.
Who builds the smart city, or who wants to build a smart city? Big tech companies who want actually to fulfill these concepts have like somehow different aspects. For example, like minimize this disruption, or especially growth and development in a sustainable way, even though it probably can't be really sustainable somehow. They also have like a goal for the city, and there was an interesting question. One company dealing like with the routers in the cities, and they said like that the goal is the perfect knowledge from data flows for optimizing the city. So in the end, it's also a question, what is actually a goal of the city? What do you want to be the city? Yeah, I think it's also very, talking about the smart city is very elusive, slippery concept. It's like there's no beginning, there's no end. It's difficult to define what is smart, what is not smart. So like talking through concepts of like different urban intelligence, it's maybe even more useful, right? So you have like some kind of civic intelligence, which is maybe slow and develops over hundreds of years. You have like digital intelligence, which is very fast, but it needs to be maybe checked a few times by this kind of other civic intelligence, right? So like maybe I think there needs to be better collaboration between different types of urban intelligences. We can split it's like new technologies in a hardware sense of things, and you have somehow the softwares of the input of data you can handle. It's like also kind of the role of the architect, which is like a difficult question here, because how will we really adapt to these new technologies towards the data, which is more handling like how to analyze data, how to implement it into the cities and into the hardware. And the other part is how to, in the end, also design maybe this hardware or this, the things we are dealing with. And
Like sensors in a way, right? Yeah.
So when we talk first about the line neon project, so it means like we are talking about two things. Then it's not the smart city per se, but it's actually this urban concept, which is then based on smart city entirely. Because I mean, basically, the whole idea of optimizing the temperature regulation inside the line is only possible with the smart cities, right? Otherwise,
or it's like, or maybe the smart city is just like a complete, as you said, like an abstract advertisement and a promise. And for example, the goal or the promise of this smartness of this new technologies is that climate change will not affect the city, that everything will work fine with the high tech things in the line.
but I just want to point out in one anecdote though, because this whole thing is smart city thing, it has become cliche, and it has become also like this. Because I know in the city where I'm from, like in Indonesia, it's called Yogyakarta. The city, they call it the city smart because they have CCTV on every crossroad. Then they can monitor the crossroad, and that they call it smart. So, and then basically it's just kind of like a gimmick. Okay, you put the digital thing on the corner of the city, and then you call your city smart. That's the dynamics. So the symbolic dynamics of these digital things in, let's say, developing countries, where they don't understand what smart city is, and then they just try to use this as a magic word, like, oh yeah, our city is smart. We are now developed cities. We are now advanced cities. I mean, that's the other side of that. But the last semester, for example, in Professor Petzoldt, what was the name? Studios. They actually kind of make participatory projects with help of this concept. I mean, they basically take an example of one city and then they want to increase the participation of the people of the city. So the kind of it should be a civic activities, which is then mediated with this, let's say, digital platform, in which they can let people decide and the people of that small cities could have like an access to an application where they can make an input to the cities what they want a certain corners of a cities looks like. Like, for example, they choose these points and then there would be like the 3D pictures of that certain part of the city, or even a picture 2D, and then you can just say like, I want flowers there, I want chairs there, because it's actually nice to sit there, because actually many things are only seen by people who walk there, right? I mean, the city council or the city planners doesn't always look at every corners and cannot always enhance experience in every corners of the city. So in that sense, smart city would actually contribute to a positive, participation.
It's like somehow similar to this other project from Lydia Jessup, who like really was influenced by this book from Shannon Mattern. And for example, this the rain garden project was like about rain gardens in New York, where like the water can drain into the drinking water. There she tried to, for example, to try to get people to collect the data from the rain gardens, and park. It's obviously maybe cleaner than in the city center where there is a bar and everybody's just like throwing cigarettes into that. And so in order also to make people more conscious about what this data is, in a like how this data manifests in the physical world where you're collecting this data, you can also somehow interact with it and bring it to a discussion, because it is like collected by you, or it's like somehow.
From that point of view, I really like this urban OS, or what is the name of this Lydia Jessup's work, that it also had this different aesthetics. It was like so different from all the other futuristic, I don't know, neon or black background and something visuals that you all super glossy Toronto visuals that like try to tell you some kind of nice fairy tale about the future, or some more utopian or dystopian. But this was just really so it was maybe even too simple and too childish at some points, but somehow it made me think about those questions and this, how to simplify, how to teach people to work for data.
Yeah.
And then I thought, yeah, this is actually also, she's probably some kind of designer, but like it's also the work for architects as designers, because we could be those mediators. And also I have seen many, like in a way I believe that the best people to organize people for some kind of urban action, as in case of Toronto, to somehow express your opinion about what is wrong in a city planning. The most equipped people are architects, and we have this authority in a way to make change, and it's also the social skill that I guess it's important for us to work with small cities. Yeah.
Maybe instead of the smart city, the mantra should be like the civic data city, which would kind of be a more humanized version of data. Because I also think that, I mean, first of all, I love data. The whole concept about data is very appealing, and I don't think the solution is to leave this just to the big tech companies. I think we should claim this back. And also historically, from I mean, data also exists on paper. It exists in silicon. It exists in many different formats, right? And so making platforms that create communities around data, like the one you described with the water collection and the aesthetics, really talk about this kind of different target group, if you want to call it, that could participate vis-a-vis something that is so bureaucratically inaccessible, but also specialized. So if you're not a specialist, you cannot talk about the smart city. And this is maybe why I always feel uneasy to talk about it, because I never feel like I'm specialized enough to say something relevant about it. And this is the annoying part. And this is something that I think we should change. But I think this is also happening in many cities to a smaller degree. This whole idea about urban data commons, like this Decode project that you mentioned in Barcelona and a few other cities which are members of that platform. I think it's a brilliant thing. It just needs to be more. It's a question also of how this looks. I totally agree. I think the visual aspects of data are very important. Data visualization probably will become a big part of our way of working with space and how we design cities. It's gonna be the task probably, which is super exciting to think about. Like, how do you design a data set that people can have access to?
What we talked about, why we need an already existing city structure where everything is already there and you just like scale a smaller on what to improve and what little changes can improve maybe the everyday life. You already have data, you can like point your finger at what isn't maybe good, or people can say I want flowers there, and then you with small inputs you can already improve life, and maybe that's also part of the smart city. I mean, I'm just thinking about Barcelona, and they like, for whom do you do, what's the purpose, and then they check and that in summer I think elderly people are not leaving their flats because they don't have anywhere to sit, they don't have shadow because it's too warm. So they implemented groups of chairs in different alleys where there's shadow, and now people, like elderly people, are sitting all day long, Monday morning, Friday evening, in those chairs chatting, because of course there's also this mentality and like atmosphere that people want to be outside, but they just didn't have the chance before. So I think like those small inputs, or where to place fountains for people to drink water if it's hot outside, or how to like which blocks should be calmed, tranquilized transport zones, stuff like that. I think that's the more interesting approach to a smart city, really.
So cities are a lot also about maintenance and care, and like maintenance and care of your built environment, and maintenance of care also of the community and the society itself. So yeah, that's a huge question though, maintenance and care. I mean, I think also it's inevitable then to talk about the capitalist society, however, because it's the idea is that there's always somebody that you pay to take care for something, because you don't have time to maintain and care whatever it is. And so I think to take this seriously, it's very difficult also in our daily lives. I mean, how much time do we spend maintaining or caring for something? I think, it's an honest question too. And I think making spaces where maintenance and care is like radically visible is a very interesting proposition for designers and architects.
I would say smart cities, it cannot be negative if it is like used for a civic purpose and then it's open for everyone. I mean, if we just consider it as a tool to improve the city, I mean, there is no harm on it. And I think, for example, you can also say it for, I mean, we're now in Germany, we're so safe from other disasters that we know. But for example, for countries or regions where they have always very often earthquakes or tsunami risk or landslides risk, I mean, those things, we can put them into data and transform that into like a early warning system. I think that's also like under the umbrella term of smart city, right? And I think that would have saved millions of lives. So I think it's also for flooding. or so, like, and then they know in which, for example, I've been talking about Jakarta too. In Jakarta, like we have like certain artificial lakes which are built to store this rainwater, which is really uncontrolled there, and the point why it's flooding, it's basically because it's not yet so well, how do you say, orchestrated the way they manage the direction of the current. So in either you make the water go through one side of the canals and then make it fill one lake, or the other. And then if we exactly know like the speed of the current that goes through one lake and then to another lake through the sensors, which is then this all digital measurement thing, which is part of the smart city concept, I think it would also enhance this way of preventing floods, for example. I mean, there are thousands of other things, but what I think the core concepts would be like, it should be like an intelligence, like you said, an urban intelligence, part of an urban intelligence, which then solve clear problems.
Yeah, that's the thing. I sometimes seem it a bit problematic that the smart city concepts are so, like, the ones we hear about are the ones managed by big companies, super egocentric, super ambitious in a bad way. They concentrate not on the real like fixes, but on some big concepts. Like they are so not connected with the real problems, right? At the end, and
Yeah, but I think it should be in public hand. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if this technology should be done or should tackle a lot of problems in cities, I think this the monitoring of the public or the city or institutions, which city institution or state institution should be high. And
Or there need to be laws where transparency and like the purpose is stated clearly. So, and maybe already that if everyone can like transparently see what's going on, also if it's profit like related, maybe that already puts a kind of pressure on those companies to maybe act in a smarter, more sustainable, more, I don't know, human, relatable way.
But I mean, another is an important aspect to just add to this, I think is the same conversation, is that what is, of course, annoying about the smart city in that respect is the exclusivity, which means like there is no outside, right? So what happens if you're not part of that? What happens in the analog space, or people who either do not want to participate in any kind of aspect of the smart city, or do not are they just left out? Are they just becoming less valuable in the city? These are very ethical questions that are attached to it. And I like the idea of a civic data, because then you have to think of different age groups, people with different technical affinities or abilities and so on, or levels of education. So I think the smugness and this exclusatory aspect of the smart city is what is the most kind of, for me, annoying thing in this whole description. It's very it's not inclusive enough, going back to the whole question of inclusion, diversity, and so on. So it's really not enough, I think, to just talk about city through the lens of being smart. Yeah. So it should be also kind of like data has to be distributed and also, again, curated in the right way, because obviously for the civic data, for the social data, you need like different kind of data or different types of data than, for example, the for catastrophes. For example, the MIT Sensible City Lab did one survey with, Sensible City, because like things you can sense in the city, and they gave like car drivers in Italy, or they installed an app where they monitored bridges and like the vibrations of the bridges in order to find out when do they have to be maintained. Also, like maybe because of this catastrophe in Genoa, and then somehow it has to be stored which data that is collecting on your device, and your mobile phone has to work for like a more objective goal, and which is more like subjective for your city or for the community you're living. And of course, to that, it's like another important aspect is data literacy. I think we talked about this at some point. Like we need it to educate ourselves about data. It's very difficult to talk about it when you don't know much about it, right? And so like maybe even in an early age, I would say maybe in primary schools, high schools, first years of universities, you need to kind of have foundation classes, I guess, about how data works, what it is, how we can act on it, and so on. Maybe also classes for people who have absolutely no any kind of digital literacy, like open classes for citizens provided by the city authorities. That would be fantastic. Or by the libraries. I mean, libraries could take a key role in being the mediators between the citizens and the data, I feel. Yeah. Or it's like the like back to the theme which also Niklas Mark proposed, like that the data centers in the end are going to be like these providers for knowledge about data, the structures into the cities. Yes, maybe this Geraldos was talking about these agile boxes thrown around that are just containers of data. Maybe they should be more than containers of data. They should have a civic function as well. And then this whole architecture around them also could change. I mean, there's a lot of potential, it seems, there. It's quite exciting to act in it somehow, not just to kind of say, okay, the big tech companies are dealing with it. It's everybody's concern, I think. It was a nice discussion. Thank you very much.